All right, hello everybody, and welcome to Rumble in the Jungle, our science storytelling CLPL. So my name is Chris. I work here at Dynamic Earth. I'm a senior learning and engagement officer. So I work in the learning and engagement team, working with school groups, with community groups, with family, doing public engagement. So doing lots of the learning and engagement across the team, across all the audiences that Dynamic Earth works with. And hopefully I've got some information and some examples of our practice that'll be helpful for you to deliver some science storytelling in your own environments as well. So I am joined by some colleagues at the Botanic Gardens who I will not introduce immediately, but I will introduce them in just a second. They are here with me, so there's actual real-life people around me. It's not all just separate people in separate rooms across the country. So today, we're going to be examining different examples of science storytelling, and we're going to be looking at how we can create some immersive spaces for telling our scientific stories, and also how we can incorporate some sensory activities and learning into our sessions as well. We're going to be, as you may have guessed, using the lens of tropical rainforests, because they are a really great model for looking at interactive activities, sensory activities, and they're really great for supporting some points in the curriculum for excellence as well. Before we get stuck in, I've got a little bit of housekeeping to do. The main thing is probably A, that we are recording this session, but B, do not worry, because we can't actually see or hear you, so you don't need to worry about being recorded and being seen. We have got your cameras and your mics off so that no one's talking over each other, but you can contribute in the chat function. So as we go through the session, if you've got any questions for me, or if you've got any questions for anyone who chats to you today, please do submit questions through the chat function and we will try and answer them when we can. It might not be straight away, but we're keeping an eye on all of these questions coming through, and we will try our best to answer them and discuss some of the points that you might want to chat about yourselves. So this is really for you to help you in your settings. So if you've got anything that you want answered, or any questions, or anything to reflect on that you'd like to chat about, just let us know. So, before we get started, I can't not say thank you to Education Scotland for giving us the funding to do this. So this is actually the fourth of 6 different sessions on science storytelling in different scenarios on different topics, talking about different techniques that we can use to tell stories. So thank you very much, Education Scotland, for doing this. And also, we want to point you in the direction of the STEM Nation Award. So we are a STEM Nation supporter. I'll just let some more people in there. We're a STEM Nation supporter. It's an initiative by Education Scotland, which is championing best practice in science education across the country. And I will pop the link in the chat if you do want to learn a little bit more about it. Even if it's not a program that you will necessarily incorporate in your class, it might be something that if you've got any STEM ambassadors at your school, or any science enthusiasts in, for example, older year groups, and they might want to have a look at it and see how that might be able to support science and STEM learning in their classroom. So I'll pop the link into the chat there for you. And we are almost at the point where I'm going to introduce who I am running the session with today. But before I do, as I say, this is the fourth of 6 sessions about science storytelling that we're doing. We've had sessions about geology and dinosaurs. We've had a session about the deep sea, about the ocean, and we've had a session about outer space. And we've covered topics such as good storytelling techniques, pitching to the right age and audience, and we are going to be talking about sensory storytelling today. We've got a couple more free sessions coming up. We've got Puffin Power, which is in February. That is going to be looking at how you can explore talking about the climate crisis with young learners, because that is a huge topic and it's a very, very pressing topic, but it can be quite an overwhelming one to talk to young people about. So hopefully that'll help you talk about the climate crisis in your settings as well. And in March, we've got Outdoor Stories, which will be looking at outdoor education, how we can put early years learners at the forefront of storytelling by getting them to lead their own exploration and create their own stories in outdoor settings. So that'll be really helpful for hitting some learning for sustainability points, and because it's a pillar of global citizenship education as well, outdoor learning. So we've got those coming up too. I'm standing in the way of some of the information about it, but if you want to find out a little bit more, we've got the URL here, dynamicearth.co.uk, and my hand is actually showing it now, which /learning/CLPL. So you can sign up to those sessions in the near future too. And now I will actually introduce who else will be talking today. So I'll stand in front of my information. We've got Caroline, should be popping up. There she is.
Hello.
So I've got Caroline and we've got Hannah. I will hand over to you both to introduce yourselves and what you do.
Thank you. So I'm Caroline and I am the Early Years Outdoor Learning Education Officer at the Botanic Gardens in Edinburgh. And
I'm Hannah Atkins and I'm a tropical botanist working at the Botanic Garden.
Lovely. Thank you very much. So the reason we've got both Hannah and Caroline suspiciously shuffling in and out of shot is that they've both got expertise that we don't necessarily have at Dynamic Earth. So by being able to offer the expertise that we've got here, as well as the expertise of scientists working in research areas to do with rainforests, as well as Caroline's expertise working with early years in outdoor settings, hopefully between us all, we're going to give you lots of examples of really useful stuff that you can use. So what we'll do now is I will hand on over to Hannah and Caroline in just a moment. And when Hannah and Caroline start their session, it'll be highlighting some things such as how multisensory and immersive spaces can help us engage early learners in science. We'll be looking at how we can diversify the ways of creating these spaces to make sure they're accessible and make sure that different learners who learn in different ways can get something out of these sessions. We'll be looking at some stories and additional resources that you can use in your own settings as well to inspire your own practice. So you might get some ideas of what you could do with your learners in future. And so hopefully we'll give you some concrete resources that you can use with them as well. And at the end, I'll be talking a little bit about how we can create all of these environments, create all of these activities, and how that can help you deliver the curriculum for excellence, a little bit on learning for sustainability, and a little bit of how it ties into realizing the ambition as well. So it's quite a lot of stuff that we're looking to cover, and we'll do some bits and pieces here and there with all of the different activities and that we're going to talk about. But the first one, as I say, that will be Hannah and Caroline. So I'm going to stop sharing just for now. So I'll be a little bit bigger on your screen, hopefully, and I will just make sure I'm bigger on my screen as well. So let's see. Oop. This is always the risk of using technology. There we go. I'm a little bit bigger now. So what I'll do is I'll pass over to Hannah and Caroline and they will show you an example of doing some science storytelling.
again, so I'm going to ask Hannah about her role in the botanics and how she ended up where she is today. So tell us about your job, Hannah.
So I'm a tropical botanist. I work mostly in Southeast Asia. I study a group of plants that grow in the understory of the rainforest and particularly in Indonesia.
Okay. And what is a botanist? What do you do?
So I'm actually a taxonomist. So I'm interested in where plants grow, how they're related to each other, and we give them scientific names if they don't already have them.
Okay. And how did you become a scientist?
So I actually started in geography as an undergraduate, and then during that study I realised that plants are really key. Understanding where plants grow and why was really key to a lot of the questions that I was interested in. So I then followed that with a master's in plant taxonomy at the Botanic Garden in Edinburgh.
And what is your favourite plant in the rainforest?
Wow, that's a good question. So my favourite plant is the Titan arum, or the Amorphophallus titanium, to give it its scientific name. And we've got a picture of it here. This is it at the when it was flowering. Can you see that without the glow? At the Botanic Garden in Edinburgh. And what's interesting about this one is it's the plant with the biggest inflorescence of all the plants in the world, and it's very smelly. So it's pollinated by flies, so it smells of kind of rotting meat and fish.
Great. So we know that you study the rainforest plants. Why is it important, Hannah? Why do we need you?
Yeah, so there are three main reasons, I think, for studying plants in the rainforest. First of all, rainforests are incredibly diverse. So they cover about 2% of the Earth's land surface, but they have about 50% of the world's species within them. So they're incredibly diverse. They're very understudied. We know much, much less about the plants growing in tropical rainforests compared to temperate areas. There are lots of species still to discover, including really big trees. And there are no field guides. So we're quite used to, in this country, having a good guide and key to identifying plants, but we don't have that at all in lots of areas in the tropics. And the third reason is that they're very threatened. So as we know, rainforests are under threat from population expansion and agricultural expansion, including kind of palm oil plantations, particularly in Southeast Asia. So they would be my three top reasons.
And what does under threat mean? By who?
Yeah, so that particularly is from these kind of twin threats at the moment, habitat loss due to the expansion of cities and the kind of pressure from agriculture.
Have we got any questions? No? If you've got any questions, feel free to pop them in the chat. It's time for Hannah to show us, meet her colleagues in an Indonesian field trip in the tropical rainforest. So I've got a globe here. I can show you where. This is where Hannah would go to with her colleagues. And on your trip, you would take a rucksack. Yes, and so she's brought along a rucksack with typical kit. So if you could show us what's in your kit bag, that would be
shall I show you what's in there? So I've got all the equipment that I need when I'm going to collect plants in the rainforest. So the first thing that I've got is a plant press.
What do you do with this?
So what we're doing when we're in the forest is we'll bring back specimens from the forest and bring them back to the herbarium in Edinburgh to study, or to the herbarium in the country that we're in to look at in a bit more detail. And it's very like the kind of press that you would use as a child to press flowers.
Yeah, we can show you later how to make your own.
What does it have inside?
So inside that, it's got blotting paper and cardboard. So we collect the plant, put it inside the paper, and then press it flat between those boards. And we have to apply some kind of form of heat so that the specimens don't go mouldy. And I've got an example here of what a specimen will look like when it comes back to the herbarium in Edinburgh. So we collect bits of plant material, and then we record a lot of information about where that plant's grown and what it looks like. So yes, what else have I got in my bag? So I've got, I've got a hat. So it's very hot and humid in the forest, so it's really important to protect ourselves from the heat. So these are leech socks.
What are leech socks?
So we put these on over our socks and beneath our boots to protect us from the leeches in the forest or any other small creatures on the forest floor.
And what are leeches?
So they're little creatures that they bite and suck blood, so we don't want those biting into us legs. But they also protect us from other things. And I've got a pair of secateurs. So that's what we use to cut down the plants when we're out there.
So like very sharp scissors that cut them. Okay.
And the next thing I've got is a GPS. So that's looks a little bit like a mobile phone, but that tells us exactly, using data from satellite, tells us exactly where we are when we make a collection, which can be really important for when we're studying the material back in England.
Okay.
And just a couple more things. So unfortunately, I've got a notebook and pencil, so I can record lots of information about where the plant is collected, what it looks like, anything that will be lost in the process of pressing. So notes on colour, notes on smell, all that kind of information.
And the GPS code you put in there too?
GPS coordinates, exactly where we are. And details sometimes about the the altitude and the humidity. We've got measuring humidity. I think that's almost the last thing. The last thing I've got is a hand lens. So that's a bit like a magnifying glass, but it's for looking at small structures on the plants, like maybe the anthers or something inside the flowers, so we can make some notes on that.
In your notebook? In
my notebook, exactly. And that's it. That's everything in my bag.
Great. I wonder what you would take in your kit bags. Maybe you could make your own kit bag at school or nursery. Okay.
Okay, perfect. So thank you very much to Caroline and to Hannah for going through some of the equipment that a researcher will take on a field trip when going to a tropical rainforest. So this is an example of how you can use the equipment. You can bring out the equipment and use this to guide the storytelling with your own learners. Now, we're going to be setting up just another activity in just a second. I'll turn the camera and the mic off as we do this, just so you don't see any of the magic being ruined, but we'll be back in just a moment. If you do have any questions or any thoughts about how you might apply this in your own setting, please do pop this into the chat, and we will be looking at everything that does come through. So we'll see you in just a minute. Okay, so hello again, everyone. I'm just going to pop myself in front of the presentation again. So we are ready for our next section. So we've actually got another special guest who was not on the slide where we showed you Hannah and Caroline's faces. And we've also got Kath, who is schools manager for the Botanic Gardens as well. And she is going to be talking a little bit about how we can do some storytelling with a rainforest theme too. But I'm not going to spoil anything that she's going to talk about. I'll hand directly on over to Kath.
Hello, everyone. So, yeah. Hi. Really great to have you all here tonight. And
if you're excited about plants like I am, this might be just your thing. So actually, I just wanted to say that my background is being a horticulturist. So I actually have trained to look after the plants. And when Hannah goes on an expedition or a field trip, and some of our other members of staff go, we actually get the seeds and some of the bits of the plants to grow back in Edinburgh and in other gardens around the world, including in Indonesia, because sometimes we need to study the plant even more. We might not know what that plant is in terms of its scientific name, so we have to grow it so it flowers, and then we can find out what it is. So one of the challenges as a horticulturist at the Botanics is you get a bag of seeds with some details of where it was found, and all of those details that we saw on the slide here, and you have to try and work out how not to kill it and to grow it successfully. So I find plants amazing, and if you like growing plants, a lot of house plants are from the rainforest because they really they can grow in the dark, in kind of darker places, because they grow deeper in the forest. So that's just something to think about. You might have plants in your house, you might have plants in your school or nursery that are actually from the rainforest. So let's get started. We're going on a field trip to the rainforest. What is that like? And when we're doing this, when we're looking at these slides and images, and there's some short videos, these are kind of visual stimulus. So you might want to think about what grabs you from these images. What ideas might you get if you showed these to children? What ideas might come up from them? And how could you use images and videos in your kind of building storytelling into your sessions? So tropical rainforests are really special places, as Hannah's already told us. And you might see a map later on from Chris about where they are in the world, and actually around the equator. And that means they don't have the seasons that we have in Scotland. It means that the day length and the night length are pretty much equal all year round. And that means it's warmer, they get more sun all year round, and they get more rain, and they can actually grow much bigger. And there's more plants able to grow than here in Scotland. So that's why the rainforest, the tropical rainforest, is so diverse. And we actually do have temperate rainforests here in Scotland. If you like going to the west coast of Scotland, you get remnants of temperate rainforests, which are just as equally important ecosystems, and they get lots of rain too. So let's see what we can find out when we go to the rainforest. So this is more kit that's from Hannah's bag that we didn't show you, and you might see the green things. The most important things of all, your leech socks to keep those blood-sucking leeches away from your skin. What else can you see in this picture? So I can see the plant press that Hannah takes to press the plants, and there's a really long thing, and that's probably to reach the really tall plants in the forest. So there's so many things in this picture, and you might see something might catch your eye in this picture of Kit. So don't forget to pack your leech socks, or this might happen. And I don't know whose ankle this is, but those are leeches. I don't know whether they're been fully fed. They look quite small to me. I think they can get even bigger than that if they've had a really good feed. But yeah, not sure I want those down my shoes. So first of all, you might need to make a camp in the forest. So there we go. You've got to make it waterproof because it does rain a lot. But what would it be like sitting in that camp? And the team will eat some food. So this is actually one of Hannah's colleagues in the rainforest, Abdul, who is an expert in his own right and will be helping identify things, helping the team not get lost, has lots of local knowledge about the animals and things, the dangers that might be in the forest. So it's really important that there's a collaboration across the team with people in Indonesia, and they're experts. So yes, time to eat some lovely food. And we're just going to watch a short video as Hannah and some of the team travel by foot and by boat. So when you're watching this, it's very short. What can you see and what can you hear? And what do you think it feels like in the rainforest? So I could hear quite a few things in that clip. I could hear some insects chirping away in the background. And Hannah and Abdul were carrying their kit bags. And the thing in the orange bag was actually that plant press that they showed us earlier on. So, oops, sorry, that's moving on from the video. So we go swooshing through the water. So there's a lot of water, there's a lot of rivers, you have to cross rivers, go up streams, and we feel tiny when we're in the forest because things grow so tall and the leaves grow so big. And in every forest, there's a kind of structure. So in the tropical rainforest, there's 4 different layers or levels because sorry, just admitting somebody there. Different amounts of rain and sun reach each layer. So if you're at the bottom, and different animals then live in different layers as well, depending on what's there and what's growing. So let's start at the bottom and work up. So it's dark and misty on the forest floor. And if you imagine it's just rained, and this photo shows how misty it can be. And the forest floor is where a lot of plants, well, there's not as many plants that grow there because they need to be able to cope with growing in shade, because only 1% or so of sunlight gets to that bottom layer. And that's actually where we get a lot of our house plants from. And there's Hannah and Sadie, who's taking one of the horticulturists, the people look after the plants, and they're recording in the notebook what they're finding. Because the scientists have studied a lot about the taller trees in the forest, but they don't know as much about the ground layers, the lower layers. So they're trying to fill in the gaps of knowledge. And it's really important to know as much as they can about the rainforest at all layers, because everything is connected. If you lose one thing, it can affect so many other things. So everything's interdependent. And that's a really important word in this forest and around the world. We all depend on each other and everything on the planet, actually. So here's an example of interdependence in action. And if you look carefully, this is a flower that grows on the forest floor. And it's one of those ones that looks a bit like rotting, it looks like meat. The colour's kind of meat-like, and it smells of rotting meat, or sometimes people smells it a bit like poo. And this is to attract flies, and you might see there's a few flies been attracted to this flower already. And they actually pollinate the flower, so they spread pollen around so it can make seeds. And this flower survives. It doesn't have any leaves, or it can't get any sunlight where it grows, so it's a parasite, and that means it actually sucks goodness out of another plant. And it sucks the nutrients and the water out of a vine that grows up the trees. So here we go. Here's a photo of, can you spot the frog? Really great camouflage there on the bark. So you get lots of kind of tree frogs as well in the rainforest. So there's the team working on the forest floor. Collecting specimens, putting them in the plant press. And it's about head high level and above, you get quite a lot of palm trees and young trees palms and other plants, and that's called the understory. So that's the second layer of the rainforest. So we've got the forest floor and the understory. Now we're going to look up really high right at the tops of the trees. And this can be 50 meters high. And the leaves of these tall trees make a kind of green roof over our heads. And other plants like orchids and vines grow up to reach the light. And lots of animals live in this layer. Lots of animals and birds live in the canopy because there's so many different kinds of fruit and seeds for them to eat. And when they poo, they help spread the seeds around the forest that were inside the fruit. So we've got a little short video taken by one of our team members of orangutans eating figs in a fig tree. They're at the top of a tree, so you've got to look really carefully. And there are some monkeys there as well. So see how many you can spot that are up in that tree. And it was really nice. I don't know whether you could hear the birds there, and there was a bit of wind blowing the leaves. Yeah, great to see. I'd love to see orangutans in the wild. So the fourth level up is the really tallest trees in the rainforest, and they poke up above that green roof of the canopy. And this is called the emergent layer because they emerge above everything else. It has the tallest trees, and their leaves get lots of sun, but actually they can get quite bashed about by the storms and the rain in the rainforest. So we've seen that the rainforest is home to loads of plants and animals, but remember, people live there too, and that's really important. They're part of the ecosystem, and they are brilliant protectors of the rainforest. They are doing a lot to help scientists and people study the plants and the things that live there. And they're actually experts in that area. They're the ones that we can learn so much from. And plants provide so many things, even for us in the UK. So things like food, shelter, clothes, things that make medicine, perfume. So how many things can you think of that you use and eat from the rainforest? You might want to go and check your cupboards and have a see. So we've seen that rainforests are habitats or homes to lots of things. And they're also really important because they're often called the lungs of the planet, because the plants take in lots of carbon dioxide and give out oxygen, and that helps stabilize the Earth's climate. So they're really important to the whole health of the planet. So it's really important to protect them and do what we can to protect them. And everything on the planet is connected. What we do here in Scotland affects the rainforests, and what happens in the rainforest affects us. So what could we do to help protect the rainforests? So thanks very much, and over to you, Chris.
Perfect. So thank you very much to Kath for taking us on that journey through the rainforest. So hopefully from having spoken to Hannah and to Caroline, we've gotten an idea for what a scientist would need to bring with them to go and research in the rainforest. And we've also gotten a trip through the rainforest so that we can get an understanding of what the environment is like, how it stimulates all of our different senses, and how you could investigate that by looking at the different layers of the rainforest and how all of those layers are incredibly different from one another. Thank thinking about some of the animals you find in the rainforest and the noises that they would make, as well as some of the plants that you would find as well, particularly some of the bizarre plants that are nothing like any that we would have in Scotland, like the Rafflesia, because thankfully we don't have many plants in Scotland that smell like rotting meat. So you can look at examples of different things that grow in the rainforest, different parts of the environment that are so unusual and interesting that it's going to help to stimulate conversations and questions from your learners in your settings as well. So we've talked a little bit about the journey through the rainforest, what the environment is like, and also what you might finish on talking about when you're in the rainforest, and the questions that you can finish on so that you can inspire a little bit of investigation into how you can protect the rainforest and how we rely on the rainforest, despite being on the other side of the world. What we're going to do now is I'm going to be handing over to Caroline in just a moment, who's going to talk a little bit about some of the techniques that you can use with early learners to engage them on a topic like the rainforest and how you might be able to create some really fun spaces for them to learn in as well. So I will just be doing some magic again behind the scenes. I will turn the camera and the mic off for just a moment. If you've got any burning questions that you want to put into the chat, please do feel free, and we will be with you in just a second. All right, so I'm joined here by Caroline. As I say, she'll be talking about some things that you can use in your settings with early learners, but I will not bother you anymore. You're going to see more than enough of me later on. I'll hand over to Caroline.
Thank you. So some ideas of things that you can do with your early years learners are an interview with a person like Hannah, like I did with Hannah, and asking about her story and how she's ended up doing the job that she's doing. And you could also make your own kit bag, get a bag and put in things that you would like to take on a pretend journey. You could create your own rainforest using blankets and torches, etc., and just try and recreate that feeling of how it feels. Is it warm? Is it cold? There's also a song that you can sing. It's on YouTube. It's Mr. Mike's, and we'll put the link on at the end. And it goes, there are 4 layers in the rainforest, 4 layers, and you could show your 4 fingers. There are 4 layers in the rainforest, 4 layers. There's forest floor, the understory, the canopy, the emergent layer. There are 4 layers in the rainforest, 4 layers. There are obviously other songs as well you could sing. There's some books, really good books that are out there. This one is a nice one that's got a bit about lots of different above and below. And there's also, you could make your own press. So it's just 2 elastic bands, 2 pieces of cardboard, and then some newspaper and some paper. So you could get some plants or flowers and make your own press, and then place it in the middle, put your elastic bands or string over it, and then put it away for a wee while, and then maybe the next day or a week later have a look and see what's changed. There you could look at the different animals that live in the rainforest as well, and the different sort of smells and textures, and you could try tasting the different foods that you would get in the rainforest. You could also, I wonder if you've got plants growing in your own house or nursery or school. Some of those plants might come from the rainforest. And what do they need to survive? Do you water them? Do they need sunlight? And you could do experiments of different growing in different areas and which ones survive and which ones don't. You could have an imaginative story and discuss with the children what is imagination, and then start out and say you're going on an imaginative journey, a little bit like Alfie does in this Alfie Weather book, and he goes a journey in his grandma's house, and he's using his imagination to discover different places and pretending that the cat is actually a tiger and things like that. So you could have your own imaginative experience and pack and what you're going to wear and how you're going to dress, and off you go, and what can you see, and then the children can join in, adding to the story. There's also a lovely story, The Day Monkey and the Night Monkey by Julia Donaldson, a well-known author. And A Journey to the North Pole is another good story by Shirley Hughes. You could also sing songs about light and dark, because obviously at the bottom it's dark and at the top it's very light. So those are some ideas. Thank you.
Okay, so those were some great ideas from Caroline about what you could use in your own settings. So some examples of some books that we can collate and share with you afterwards as well, and some ideas of things that you might not necessarily associate with a rainforest straight away. But as Caroline says, the different parts of the rainforest can be very, very dark or very, very bright. So all of these different ideas you can apply from different activities that you might already do with your learners into a rainforest setting. So there are lots of different ways that you can approach how you might do imaginative play and create your own stories with young learners. So we've got a few different approaches which are quite child-led, and these are ways that you can help your session be shaped by the learners that you have with you. And a lot of the time, it's really great to try and get young people to use their imagination to create their own adventure, if you like, in these settings. And you can explore different ideas. And like Caroline was saying, you can take the everyday and make it exciting, imaginative, and emulate a completely new contrasting environment to ones that they're used to. Now, I'm going to be running through a story that we do at Dynamic Earth now as well to highlight a different approach that you might want to take. So what I will do is I will share some pictures again, and we will investigate what we can do. So let's see how good I am at multitasking and moving things around. Here we go. So we finished by Kath's session by thinking about how we could help protect the rainforests. And you might find that when you've got young learners, that might not be something that you want to ask them straight away. You might want to introduce rainforests as a new idea. And I'm also conscious that in a lot of formal learning environments that you might have a set amount of time that you have to do something. You might need to tick off some points to make sure that kids are attaining different particular levels and experiences and outcomes, and you want to make sure that you've covered different topics in quite a limited amount of time, perhaps not with many resources. So I'm going to do a story now which will give you an idea of how we might want to run a structured session about the rainforest, which doesn't have as much child-led imagination necessarily, but also uses opportunities for kids to explore and learn and make use of sensory activities as well. So I want to preface this by saying that at Dynamic Earth, we have our own spaces that we set up to run these workshops. And we know that people are often coming to us to do one workshop and then they go away again. So we can set up a space so that it is ready for this one session, and then people can come do the session and leave. So it's a little bit easier for us to create an immersive space by, for example, setting up a scene or using colored lighting, because that's all that session might be, that's all that space might be being used for that day. And when you're in a classroom, for example, that might be a little trickier because you have to use that space for lots and lots of different things. But I'm hoping that there will be some elements that I'm going to cover today that will be usable by you in your situations too. If you have any questions about why we've done things the way we've done them, or about how we've approached this story, then feel free to write any thoughts you have down. But otherwise, I will get started. Now, this is a session that we run for nursery to primary 2 age, and it's also one that has never run online. So this is its online debut. There will be some sensory elements of it, which surprisingly will not necessarily work through a camera as well as they might in person. But please do play along. If I ask some questions, please do feel free to answer them as if you were an early years learner before you'd gotten to the first level of the curriculum for excellence. Do know that I know that you probably know a lot of these answers, but I'm going to pretend that I'm now presenting to a group of young learners. So we are going to start our tropical rainforest story. So welcome to Dynamic Earth. My name is Chris, and I'm going to tell you a story all about animals that live in a tropical rainforest on the other side of the world. But before we do that, I've got a question for you. Where do we find tropical rainforests? Now, I might get some answers through. Some of you might be pondering this a lot, but we can have a little think, and if you're not sure, I can show you. They are found near the equator. Now, you might have heard of the equator before. It's this big imaginary line that goes all the way around the middle of planet Earth. Now I'm going to put myself on planet Earth, so I'm just underneath the equator. So we've got this big imaginary line that goes right around the middle of planet Earth. This is the equator, and we get rainforests very close to this imaginary line. And you can see some examples of tropical rainforests in the green bits on the map. There's one above my head, there's one over there, and there's one further over there, all the way to the left. So one of the most famous ones is in South America. If you've ever heard of the Amazon rainforest, that's this one. We get rainforests in West Africa as well. So that is the West African rainforest. And then I think just above my head, oh no, I misjudged it. Over here, we've got the Southeast Asian rainforest. So in countries like Indonesia, we get these tropical rainforests as well. So lots of different kinds of rainforests in lots of different parts of the world. But can anybody tell me either of the two ingredients we need for a tropical rainforest to grow? Now, the weather needs two particular things for a rainforest to grow. One of the clues is in the name rainforest. So if any of you are at your computer shouting, "It's rainy," then you are absolutely right. A rainforest wouldn't exist without lots and lots of heavy rain. And the other thing that these tropical rainforests need is lots and lots of heat from the sun. It needs to be really, really hot so that lots of plants and lots of animals can grow. So it needs to be really hot and really, really rainy. So that's where we get our rainforests, but we're all the way up there. We're really far away from where we get these tropical rainforests. It's not hot enough in Scotland. It's not rainy enough in Scotland. You need both of those things for your rainforest to grow. So We've got lots of different plants that grow in the rainforest, and in particularly for a forest, you need lots and lots of trees. And the tallest trees are incredibly tall. They're taller than most of the trees that we get in Scotland. In fact, some of the tallest trees can be as tall as lots and lots of buses stacked on top of each other. So I want you to guess how many buses you'd need to stack on top of each other to get to the very top of the very tallest tree. I can hear you all, I can sense you all shouting it at your screens, but let's find out together. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 double-decker buses stacked on top of each other just to get to the height of one of the tallest trees. So that gives you an idea of just how huge the trees in the rainforest are. But it's not just plants that we get in the rainforest. I said that animals need lots of warmth and water to grow as well. So let's have a look at some of the animals that we find in the rainforest too. So you can shout out any animals you recognize. You might recognize the toucan or the lemur or the frog. Here we've got an example of a beautiful butterfly, and we've got a lovely sloth, a three-toed sloth. We've got an orangutan that we heard about earlier on. We've got different snakes, we've got mambas, we've got capybaras, which are like huge guinea pigs, and we've got parrots as well. So that was just a super speedy look at some of the beautiful, colorful animals that we might find in the rainforest. So all of these animals are really, really different, and they all live in different parts of the rainforest. And because the trees are so tall, there's lots of different places that animals can live on the tree, underneath the tree, or they can travel between the trees. And we're going to investigate that a little bit more with our story. And now that we've learned what the environment's like and what we might find in the rainforest, we're going to get started. So our story will begin when we have decided what our rainforest sounds like. Can you tell me any noises we might hear in the rainforest? Maybe we'd hear some squawking birds, we'd hear some running water, we'd hear some roaring jaguars and big cats and maybe some monkeys chattering. There are lots of noises. What do you think it would smell like? Do you think it smelled nice, like sweet fruit? Or maybe nasty from lots of dung that might have ended up on the forest floor? What do you think you could feel? You think you could feel any bark on the trees, or you could run your hands through the water, or maybe if there was a gentle capybara, you might pat it and feel its soft fur. And do you think there's anything you could taste? There's lots of things that we eat that come from the rainforest, like fruit, like coffee and chocolate. Now, I'm guessing a lot of you don't drink a lot of coffee, not at your age, but the beans for coffee, they grow in the rainforest. Now, I think we are rainforest experts. I think we are ready to investigate our rainforest story. So it was a very hot and sticky day in the rainforest with lots of chattering monkeys, with lots of roaring jaguars and lots of lovely fruit growing in the trees. The sun was shining down, but it didn't get all the way down to the bottom of the rainforest. It was quite dark down there. And on the forest floor, there was a little beastie making a rustling noise as she moved through the crispy leaves. And here is our little beastie here. This is Belinda. And Belinda is a caterpillar. And she wriggles like this. She wriggles so that the middle of her body goes up and then she flattens out. And she wriggles and she wriggles. She was wriggling through the rainforest. Can we all wriggle like Belinda? Through the rainforest, on the forest floor, through some nice crispy leaves. She was on the way to a party. She was on her way to a huge party called the Ugly Bug Ball. Now, the Ugly Bug Ball was a big deal, and Belinda was running late because she can't move that fast. So she finally arrived at the party, and she had a little look to see if she could spot her friends. And first of all, she saw Sally. So can we all shout, "Hello, Sally"? Here is Sally. I'll bring her up so you can have a closer look. You can see that she's got a long, long body, and she's got long, spindly legs, and she looks a little bit like a stick because Sally is a stick insect. And we also had Belinda's friend, Anton. So can we all shout, hello, Anton? And Anton is an ant. I'm sure you're very surprised that Anton turned out to be an ant. He has got these long antennae, these big, long antennae on his head. And he's got these nice 6 legs as well, just like Sally. So Anton and Sally, they had arrived at the party a while ago and they were munching on a big pile of leaves. Hi, Belinda, said Anton. I've been waiting for you. Come and have some leaves with us. And Belinda, she was desperate. She was really, really hungry. So she came on up and she thought, oh, I want some leaves, but I can smell something a little bit weird. Anton said, well, there's some fruit as well, if you'd like to try that. So Belinda went to sniff some of the fruit. So I'll hold it up so that you can sniff it too. This is actually cheating a little bit because these are actually sweets that are flavored like the fruit, but oh, they smell quite strong. Belinda thought, Anton, what fruit is that? That's called a durian, Belinda. Oh, I don't think I like that, Anton. It smells a bit too strong and not very sweet like the fruit that I like. I might just have some leaves. And she went to munch on some leaves, but then thought, oh, I can smell something that smells worse than that durian. And Sally said, oh, the last table that was free was next to the dung beetles. I don't know if you know what their party snack was, but I don't think you want any of that. Do you think you know what the dung beetles might have brought as a party snack? Because I think you might be right. It was lots of poo. So Belinda thought, I don't want that durian and I don't want that poo. I think I might just eat this big pile of leaves. So Belinda and Sally and Anton munched and munched and munched on leaves for as long as they could until they were absolutely stuffed. Now, Belinda and Anton, they ate till they just couldn't move a muscle. But Sally, she surprisingly had a lot of space in that big, long body, and she wasn't too full to move. She decided that she wanted to go to the dance floor, and she wanted to dance the insect dance with all of the other bugs. Now, I'm sure that you all know the insect dance already, but if for some reason you don't, I can give you a reminder. So, it sounds a little bit like another song that you might have heard before, and you have to point to different parts of your body, but we have to pretend that we are insects for this because it's the ugly bug ball. So, we have our head, thorax, abdomen, abdomen, head, thorax, abdomen, abdomen, and eyes and ears and feelers and pincers, head, thorax, abdomen, abdomen. Okay, so we can do that nice and fast now that you all know the insect dance, okay? So if you're ready to do it with me and with Sally and with Anton, it goes. Head, thorax, abdomen, abdomen, head, thorax, abdomen, abdomen, and eyes and ears and feelers and pincers. Head, thorax, abdomen, abdomen. Okay, now, I know that you'll have been doing the insect dance all day, every day for ages. I'm sure you all love the insect dance, so I won't make you do it anymore. But Belinda was sitting watching as we all did the ugly bug ball dance, and she was watching as all the other insects did the dance as well. Now, do we really have a thorax and an abdomen? Because I don't think that I actually have a thorax and an abdomen just like all the insects do. And Belinda didn't really as well. And as she looked at the other insects, and she looked at Sally and she looked at Anton, she realized, oh, my body is not really the same as all of the other insects doing this dance. And she realized it was time for her to go out into the rainforest and perhaps transform into an insect who'd be able to do the dance. So she was ready to leave the ugly bug ball, and she turned to Sally and she shouted, Sally, I am ready to go on an adventure and I have to leave right now. Sally thought, well, that sounds really exciting, and shouted to Anton, Anton, Belinda's just invited us on a big adventure into the rainforest. And Belinda had to interrupt and say, no, 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 no. I have to do this adventure by myself. I don't have an insect body just like everyone else who did this dance. And I need to go, I need to grow, and I need to come back a changed insect. So Anton and Sally were sad that they weren't able to go with Belinda on her adventure, but they knew that she had to do it. So they wiggled their feelers at her to say goodbye. Can we all wiggle our feelers to say goodbye? As Belinda leaves the ugly bug ball and she wriggles along the forest floor. So she wriggled and she wriggled, and she wriggled and she wiggled, and she went along the forest floor to see if she could find a nice, quiet, safe place to rest so she could make a cocoon. So she moved along for a long time because, as we said before, Belinda is quite small. She's quite slow, and so she was just going as fast as she could, but it took a little while. And eventually she found a nice big log, which had lots of space underneath it, and it was nice and quiet. So she thought maybe this would be a great place to rest. And then she suddenly heard the sound of something walking up behind her. And she turned around and she had a look. And she saw some fuzzy feet. And she looked up at some fuzzy legs. And then she looked closely at 8 eyes on a big fuzzy face. Do you know what this beastie is? This is Tegan, and Tegan is a tarantula. What are you doing here, little caterpillar? Asked Tegan. This is no place I've ever seen caterpillars before. Belinda said, oh, I was just looking for a safe place to make my cocoon. I'm going to make a cocoon, and I'm going to have a little rest for a while. And Tegan thought, oh, wonderful. Well, Belinda, I can tell you a great place for you to build your cocoon and where you can rest for a long, long time. And Belinda thought, oh, okay. Do you think that Belinda should follow Tegan's advice of where she could have a nice long rest? I don't think she should. Belinda thought, do you know what? I don't think this is the right place for me. I think I'm going to explore a little bit more. So she ran as fast as she could, which, as we said, wasn't very fast because Belinda is only a little caterpillar. And she wriggled and she wiggled until she couldn't see Tegan the tarantula anymore. And she wriggled and she wiggled up the side of a tree on the rough, tough bark on the tree. And she kept going up and up and up. And she thought, well, I must be far away from that big tarantula now. But suddenly, something sharp pinched her around her middle, and she suddenly zipped up into the air. Belinda had no idea what had happened. What do you think has grabbed Belinda? She's going up through the air. She's seeing all of these different flashes of green and red as the leaves and the flowers pass her eyes super fast until suddenly she's right up above the treetops. I think you're right. It was a bird that had gripped onto her with its beak. Now, Belinda wriggled and wiggled so she could turn around and look up at the bird, and she was absolutely right. The bird looked down at her with big beady eyes and went to open its beak. But she wriggled and she wiggled and she wriggled and she wiggled, and she managed to get out of the bird's beak and tumbled down towards the trees. The wind was blowing up here above the trees. It was blowing her around, and she fell down and down till she plopped onto a leaf. Oh my goodness, Belinda thought. I've gone on my adventure to make my cocoon, and I've almost been eaten by a spider down on the forest floor, and I've almost been eaten by a bird all the way at the top of the rainforest. I don't know where it's safe for me to make my cocoon. So she took a moment to have a little breather on her leaf, and she looked around to see if there was anything else to worry about up here in the trees. and she could still see some birds swooping around looking for some food. Do you think this is safe for little Belinda? Probably not, no. So Belinda was going to have to keep on moving. But just as she was about to set off, she heard a rumbling. She thought, oh no, that better not be the rain starting. But the rumbling got louder, till it was a big crack of thunder right above her head, and the rain started to fall. It fell really heavily. It fell onto the leaves, and because Belinda's such a little caterpillar, she was catapulted right off the leaf and started falling down into the leaves and the branches below. She couldn't hold on tightly enough. So she fell between the leaves, and she ended up falling down onto the leaves further down in the rainforest. She plopped down onto a branch and thought, oh, I thought it was bad enough that a tarantula tried to eat me, and that a bird tried to eat me, and now even the weather is out to get me. Belinda was feeling quite cross, but she started looking around, and she started to hear a new noise and wondered, what on earth could that be? And as she looked around, she heard a shh, 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 whoosh, a shh, 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 whoosh. And as she looked in the distance, this sound started getting louder and louder. And she started to see a big fuzzy orange thing getting closer and closer until it got very, very close indeed. Now, Belinda didn't want to be knocked off yet another bit of a tree in the rainforest, so she plucked up her courage and she shouted, "Stop!" at the big fuzzy orange thing. But remember, she's a very little caterpillar, so it was more like a stop. Now, our big fuzzy orange thing was swinging through the trees and went whoosh, stopped right in front of Belinda's branch. Oh, I'm so sorry, but what is a little caterpillar like you doing all the way up here in the canopy? This isn't a very safe place for you. All of my family and friends are coming to collect some leaves to make some nests. I'm Ollie, by the way. And Belinda thought, what do you mean? I have almost been eaten by a spider. I've almost been eaten by a bird. I've almost been knocked down off the trees by the rain. And now you're saying that I can't sit on any of these leaves because all of you are coming to build some nests. And Ollie said, well, yes, orangutans will swing around and collect lots and lots of leaves to make some nice nests up in the tall trees. I think that you might want to go a little bit further down into the rainforest, said Ollie. Belinda thought, what do you mean? Where am I supposed to go? And Ollie pointed out a vine over just a few feet away that Belinda could travel down to find a nice, cool, safe space where she wouldn't be disturbed and she could make her cocoon. So Belinda sighed and thought, I didn't mean to be rude, Ollie. Thank you for all of your help, and thank you for pointing me into a place where I can go and make my cocoon. So Belinda decided to follow this vine down into the understory, where there aren't as many birds swooping around, and there aren't orangutans swinging around to make their nests, and there aren't any tarantulas crawling around ready to munch little caterpillars. And as she traveled down this vine, she found a nice quiet space where it had some nice shelter from any big raindrops as well. Do you think this might be a safe place for Belinda to rest? I think we finally found the right place, and she made her cocoon, and it looked a little bit like this. So she hung from a branch and she made this cocoon, and she waited there for a couple of weeks, and she rested until she was ready to come out again. And then when she was ready to come out, she didn't look like she used to. She was a big butterfly. So Belinda looked completely different. She was a lovely big butterfly who could fly around the rainforest. So she decided it was time to test out her new wings. She fluttered around the rainforest and she was desperately hungry. So she slurped up some nectar from some of the plants and the flowers, and she filled herself up with lots and lots of food. She thought, right, I have grown. I'm now Belinda the butterfly, and I think I'm ready to go back and take part in the insect dance. So she flew back to where she had set out from and looked around on the forest floor to see if she could spot any of her friends down on the ground. And wandering along the forest floor, she spotted a little stick insect called Sally and quite a big ant called Anton. And Belinda flew over to them and said, Sally, Anton. And they looked around like, that sounds like Belinda, but I don't recognize. Oh, Belinda, is that you? She said, it's me. I've gone on my adventure. I found a safe place to make my cocoon. I escaped a tarantula. I escaped a bird. I met an orangutan. I climbed up trees. I went down vines, and I have finally grown into a butterfly. And she went back with Anton and Sally towards the dance floor in order to do the insect dance. Now, if you really want to, we can do the insect dance again, but if you think you know it well enough, then we don't have to do it again if you don't want. But we can look at some examples of some other animals that we might find in the rainforest. So we've got a tarantula up in the corner. We've got butterflies. We've got some creatures called praying mantises. We've got a big ant just like Anton behind me here. And above me, that's a leaf insect, which is a bit like a stick insect, except surprisingly, it looks more like a leaf and it's very good at camouflaging in the bushes. But these are just pictures of these different animals that we get in the rainforest. I want to take just a moment to show you a couple of different mini beasts that we can find in the rainforest for real. So what I will do is I will make myself a little bit bigger, and I'll show you some real rainforest animals that we have. So I will duck out of shot to grab a stag beetle. Now, if I hold this up here, there we go. Hopefully you'll be able to see it without the glare of the light. Now, we've got huge beetles that we find in the forest, the rainforest, down on the forest floor. We've got tarantulas. Here is I'll hold it this way up. Here is a black velvet tarantula. My brain always wants me to call it a red velvet tarantula, and that's not right at all. This is a black velvet tarantula, a little bit like Tegan. Now, they might eat caterpillars, but they're probably not going to try and eat anyone like you or me. We are far too big for them to really bother with. So they're probably going to keep out of our way. And even if they did bite us, it would be about as painful as a bee sting, rather than anything more serious that would send you to hospital. And we've also got a lovely butterfly. So here we've got a blue morpho butterfly. Now, what is amazing about the blue morpho butterfly is that it's not actually got any blue in its wings. It doesn't have any blue pigment. So it's just the way that the light sparkles off the wings, how it reflects and refracts off the wings, that makes it look a really bright blue. So that color is never going to fade. So that is our butterfly, and we've got a giant walking stick insect. Now, I don't know if I can avoid the light here because it's so big that there's no way I can put it in the middle of the light, but that gives you an idea for how big some of these insects can be. Now, To break the illusion for a moment, when we run the session with young learners in the centre, we go through lots of different examples and specimens of different bugs and mini beasts, some that we met in the story and some that we didn't. And we can talk about adaptations or features of these bugs, such as being able to camouflage, such as the bright colour of the blue morpho butterfly, just so that all of our learners can see that the bugs that we talked about in the story, they are real creatures that do actually exist, and they've got these special adaptations to live in the rainforest. So we've got creatures like our tarantula that live down on the forest floor. We've got our butterflies that we'll find a little bit higher up, and we can talk a little bit about how all of those creatures live in the rainforest and why they live in an environment like that, and why we don't find them in an environment like our own. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit in a moment about how we tie some of our content into some of the initiatives from Education Scotland, just like I mentioned earlier on. But before we do, I also wanted to show a couple of resources that we use for some learners in a different sensory kind of a way. So I've got a couple of 3D printed examples of specimens that I showed you. So, for example, we've got a 3D printed stag beetle here, and we've got a 3D printed tarantula just here. Now, the main reason for these being made is so that any participants with any kind of visual impairment is able to appreciate adaptations of these specimens as well and get an idea for the size of them too. So we had a placement student last year. We were very, very lucky to have a placement student who wanted to contribute to improving accessibility for us. So they created these 3D printed models of these rainforest specimens so that for anyone who might not be able to see the real specimens that we have, there's a way of them actually engaging with it. So there's a tactile feel to it. Now, I know that you may not have real rainforest specimens already in your school. That would be quite an unusual thing to have in your repertoire. But if you've got any items that you can use like cuddly toys, or if you're very, very lucky to have something like a 3D printed 3D printer, or you can get any plastic models or any toys, then it still gives you the opportunity to look at them up close, get an idea for the size of them and what the body of some of these creatures might be like. Finally, before we move on to the next section, I wanted to show you this model of the rainforest. Now, if I show it sideways, you might get an idea for how the relief of this model is different on different levels. So down here, we've got little bits that's sticking out a little bit more. These bits that stick out more, they represent our forest floor. Then we move up to our understory. We've got our canopy and we've got our emergent layer as well. These are the 4 layers of the rainforest that Kath and Hannah talked about earlier on. They all feel a little bit different. They've all got different shapes. And it's another way for anyone with any kind of visual impairment or anyone who might learn in a more tactile way to get an understanding of how there are 4 distinct layers in the rainforest and what that might mean for different animals that you might find there, different plants you might find there as well. So that is just a little touch on some of the items that we use in our story. We've got about 10 minutes left, so I'm just going to do a little whiz through some of the initiatives that we try to meet and that we try to align with from Education Scotland, and hopefully that'll help you with creating stuff that will align with those initiatives in your settings as well. So I will pop us back into here. And I'll put myself in front, and then we'll have a little look at everybody's favourite, a little bit of theory. So there we go. Now, if we've got any questions, we don't have any questions yet, but that's okay. There's still 5-10 minutes if you do want to throw anything in there. But I will move on to chatting a little bit about the curriculum for excellence. Now, as I said before our story, I know that we're in a different situation as an informal science learning centre to your formal learning environment. But hopefully our approach will give you an idea of how you might be able to approach science storytelling. So we exist to support a lot of your learning. So we want to be able to meet curriculum points. And as we were saying earlier, Rainforest is a really great model for delivering a lot of learning, and because it really helps hit a lot of science points really, really easily. And when you're doing a science story, one thing I'm really keen to emphasize is that you don't need to try and pack loads and loads of science in. So I'm going to just bring up the different curriculum points that we try to support with this story. And there's actually only one that comes under the banner of sciences, and that is observing living things in the environment over time and seeing how they depend on one another. So with our session, the story is part of a wider session we do, which is about 45 minutes total, with more time looking at specimens and answering questions, and obviously the sensory activities like using the sniff pots. In that 45 minutes, that's the only science point we're really trying to hit. And we decided that a rainforest session would be a really great way to do that because, as I say, all the reasons that have already been mentioned, a rainforest is full of biodiversity and all of these different links between different plants and animals. So if we strip back this outcome, we are looking at how living things rely on each other. So we can pick a living thing we find in the rainforest, and we can look at how they interact with other living things. And that's what we've done with Belinda. But we chose Belinda as a protagonist. She's an animal who lives in the rainforest. And then the rest of her adventure, we used the science to guide her interactions with all the other creatures in the rainforest. And it would inform how she interacted with different characters in the story. So, for example, when she met the tarantula spiders, tarantulas are likely to eat small insects, so they could potentially be dangerous for a caterpillar to meet in the wild. There is also going to be the risk of birds trying to eat caterpillars as well. So the bird was a threat. Whereas Ollie the orangutan, they are mostly herbivorous. As we saw, they eat figs. So it's very rare for them to eat insects. If they've got a good supply of fruit and of other plants, then they are going to go for those sources of food instead. So we knew that we could introduce an orangutan, but it wouldn't necessarily be a threat to Belinda. So we could look at this science learning point, and then we could apply different sort of storytelling techniques to this, and we could have it steered by real interactions in the environment. Now, you've probably clocked that I haven't mentioned the sensory aspect of it explicitly so far. And I would say that when we were trying to incorporate some sensory activities, we were looking a little bit more at the social studies aspects here. Because here you can dive into a little bit of depth about differences between places and environments. And so we can use these social studies learning points that are above my head, which are about exploring different climate zones that are heavily contrasting and describing how the climate affects the things that live there. We are getting a sense of place. So we can use sensory activities to give a sense of place, and that can also then help shape the story around the characters that we've got. So I would say that we can use the science outcome as the key hook here, and then we can use the social studies to flesh it out a little bit. And then really the 4 literacy and English points that are, 2 of which are behind me and 2 of which are over there, those are things that you are going to be able to hit with lots of different storytelling and lots of different topics. So we've got listening and talking different situations and engaging with others and when to talk, aspects like that. And any kind of storytelling session, it gives you the opportunity to highlight when it's good to chat to each other and when it's good to offer your answers. And then behind me, I will duck out of the way of this one, understanding stories and showing understanding of what we listen to. That it just means that if you're giving them opportunities to ask questions, to answer questions as well, then they're getting to demonstrate their understanding of what you've talked about. So we can talk about the different layers of the rainforest. We can ask where Belinda met all these different animals, and she met them in the layers that these animals live in. If you reinforce that learning at the end and they've remembered it, and they're remembering science points and they're able to articulate the science that you have told them about. So that's a little bit about how we approach the curriculum for excellence. I'm aware that we've only got 5 or so minutes left, and I don't want to keep you too long when you've already come here at the end of the school day. So I want to talk a little bit about learning for sustainability. It's a really important initiative in Scottish education, but I'm aware that it can seem a little tough to define, a little bit nebulous, a little bit tricky to get your head around. So I just wanted to highlight some of the things that we try to think about in a session like this. Now, some of them are very clear. So these are all hashtags from the Learning for Sustainability word cloud, which I'm sure quite a lot of you are familiar with, which you can see on the Education Scotland website. And these are all elements of learning for sustainability that we try to cover and that the curriculum for excellence tries to cover as well. Aspects like understanding interdependence, that's basically covered in that specific science learning point from the curriculum. And then other ones can be a little bit trickier, especially at an early years level. So, for example, protecting biodiversity, that is quite a, well, they're 2 quite long words, potentially, for quite an early level. And I wouldn't say that you necessarily have to explicitly cover this in your practice, but I would try and think about how you're scaffolding future learning. And I'm sure many of you are thinking of that all the time. So in this case, there was no point at which I talked about any threats to the rainforest, but that's something that they might cover later on as they progress through school or as they progress through whichever setting you're in. Rainforests are quite a popular topic for looking at contrasting environments, and it's something that a lot of kids are really interested in. So if we're talking about all the different kinds of plants, all the different kinds of animals, all the differences between the rainforest environment and their home environment, then they are getting that understanding for biodiversity and all the differences between that environment and our own. And so that's going to help scaffold future learning about what the threats would be and why that's a bad thing, because they've already understood a range of diversity in these places. And that would go for the responsible for use of our planet's resources, which I'm blocking, but that's what that one says. And when it comes to topics such as culture and global citizenship and value-based learning, I think storytelling is a great way of approaching these areas. So one quote that I was keen to share that was that I heard from a global citizenship researcher was that the power of stories is not if they're factual, it's in the emotional connection to them. So if you can create a story with an emotional connection, the power of the story is based in whether they're believed, not in whether they're real. So you want to use the real content to guide your story, which is what we try to do with the interactions in the rainforest. But the core thing is having a story that will resonate with your learners. So that's why we picked a protagonist. We picked Belinda, so we had someone to root for, and that gives us something to invest in. And the relationship she had with all the other characters, it was positive. Anton and Sally were super supportive. And so that relates a little bit to values-based learning. You want to have some interactions that you would like your learners to use. So, Mrs. Carroll, we will definitely signpost, we'll send up a follow-up email with some resources that we would recommend as well. Just before we go, I realize I'm on 5:29. I'm just going to say that with realizing the ambition, this is the point where I just wanted to say that I recognize that you can't always be child-led necessarily. You might be limited in the amount of time that you have, but the interactions that you have with your learners and that your learners have with each other during a session are hugely important. And your children are constantly making sense of your surroundings, of their surroundings, and that is also learning. So when we are creating sessions, we are a science centre, we want to get across science points, but we want to make sure that we recognise that young people are processing their environment all the time, and that counts as learning too. That exploration, that new environment, that's also a type of learning. So don't underestimate the importance of doing that. If you've given young people a new environment, new stories to talk about and to digest, and giving them opportunities to articulate anything that they've learned or any questions they may have, that all counts as science storytelling. And if you're using sensory activities, if you're using stimuli to guide your own adventure, then this is all learning. And that feels like a nice point to end on. I realise now we're on 5:30 exactly, so you might want to zoom off. But I hope you have enjoyed the session. I know we tried to pack quite a lot in there, but if you do have any questions for me or for anyone from our botanics team, I've got the email addresses here. And yes, thank you very much for your kind comments in the chat. If you do want to email me, my email address is there, and the schools team email address, and Kath can answer any queries you may have, the email address up there as well. So thank you very much, everyone. Oh, and my colleague has reminded me that I need to mention this too. I promised I would say it, and I haven't said it yet. If you can fill out our feedback form, that would be fabulous. We will email it out as well. But any comments, any responses, that all feeds back to us being able to offer content like this for free because of funding from bodies like Education Scotland. So everything that you contribute in this form helps us to report back to Education Scotland about what did work, what didn't work, and what we can change and make better for the future. So I promise I will stop there. I will turn the camera and mic off, give you a chance to type anything up in the chat before you leave if you want to, but feel free to go if you have no questions for us, and we'll send you a follow-up email, some resources in the feedback form shortly. Thank you very much.